Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by, and this is part 2 of the Iffy Plant Brigade. Plants are in a state of rescue as discussed at the beginning of yesterday's part 1 video. So if you want a more elaborate explanation, that's at the start of the previous video. And today I want to just carry on. As I come across the plants and I'm watering, I'll just pick them up with the camera and just go over them, the state they're in, why they got like that, and well, it's difficult to say what I'm doing about them. You know, in most cases they were repotted and you cross your fingers and you hope for the best. There's not much more you can do, but I'll go over the plants as I pick them up to water, and we'll have a chat about them as I go along. Now, I'm doing a CalMag water today. That's at a TDS of, I think it's about 85, something like that, but around the 80 to 90 mark. It's a low level, and I've now incorporated that into a regular program. We're coming to the time of year where growths are starting, and that's the time when perhaps a little bit of a kick in that arena might be a good idea. Rick, channel Rick L, has just done a good video. For some reason or other, when I explain all this stuff, everybody gets a headache. And when Rick does it, everybody goes, oh yeah. So if you want a good chat about calcium, magnesium, the relationship between them, their relationships with the types of fertilizer you might be using, go and have a listen to Rick. He explains it easier than I do. I tend to get a little bit too technical. But yeah, it's a good video. Go and have a listen. And quite honestly, I never used to worry about these sort of things. I still don't worry about them, but I'm quite happy to incorporate something in my watering and feeding program that makes sense. Without any further explanation, to me it makes sense why a little bit of a kick with the calcium and magnesium chelated like it is in CalMag with some iron in there. I know why that works, and I'm quite happy to incorporate it. And this is the time of year with quite a few of my plants it's going to do the most good. It's when those new growths are kicking off. With those new growths, new roots, yeah? Any structures that are being built need that bit of help. So that's what I'm up to now anyway. There's a classic case in point. I killed two birds with one stone here. I had a giant version of this Maxillaria arachnitiflora that was just stalling. It was just going downhill badly. And it was difficult at first to work out why until I took it out of its little basket. The basket was lined with a very fine plastic mesh, so the roots couldn't get out. And therein was the main problem. It was totally root bound. It had eaten the media. Literally, it was growing in nothing, so it just wasn't getting hydrated. And if a plant isn't getting hydrated in its basic form, it's obviously short on every nutrient, isn't it? Because it's just not getting in there. So it was just about surviving. Split it in 3, sold 1, but the case in point I'm getting at is that this at first I thought was a virus, and I'm carefully watching the new growths to see if this leaf pattern is maintained. And if it is, I will probably have to chuck the plant. But if you have a look at the smaller version, that's a new leaf. Now it may have some of the oncidium type dark markings that I've discussed in the past, but in the main the new leaves don't look quite so bad, and it's now chucking up new growths. Yeah, well, those new growths need some help. There's 3 on that little plant, one round the back there and these 2 pushing on. That's the time the CalMag does its job. Now the larger version has only just started pushing up some new growths, and it's the one with, as I said, I left that leaf on. That's the worst one along with that one, but some of the leaves aren't too bad. Yeah, so I'm watching for the new growths, but the new growths need help. Good morning, Mr. Cat. Bleary-eyed. You've been sleeping again, haven't you? That's all you ever do, sleep. I'm coming back as a cat. Anyway, these 2 are being rescued. They are still on the danger list until I see clean new growths coming out in profusion. At which point, when it's got new leaves that look clean, I'll cut the really bad ones off. And that'll improve the look of the plant no end. But both versions are now pushing out their new growths, ideal time for the CalMag. So the only reason that went downhill was it was totally root bound. You can see the remains of what roots were left on the plant. It was just a solid mass of roots with no media. Well, the new roots that are coming out now have got media to go in and plenty of room to expand. So they're on the mend. Now this little one's the classic, bought for pretty blooms. It was actually my daughter's. It's a miniature dancing ladies, I think. It's got no flipping tag on it. I'm going to have to get my tag sorted out. Rose is going to be back soon. I shall be in the doghouse. Having bought them for me, the least I can do is get on and use them. But this had virtually no roots when it was repotted. This was just bought from a garden centre because it had pretty blooms on. And the latest new growth is pushing roots, and they are getting down in the media, so it stands a chance of recovery. And a dose of CalMag will do that the world of good on that new growth. So coming on, but the classic, rubbish media, roots virtually lost at the point the plant was bought, didn't get repotted until, as I say, it was my daughter's, so it didn't get repotted till it came down here. And by then, quite honestly, it was too late. But it's recovering. We'll get there with that one, I suspect. Now I'll put a picture of the bloom up on this one. This one is a bit special. It's classed as a Cambria. Well, there's no such flipping thing. It's made up name. It didn't have a good root system, but I succumbed to the pretty blooms on this one. Just had to have it. Got it. Came to repot. Lousy root system. This growth pushed on okay and has produced roots. So it's now got a root system on its existing latest growth, and it's now just starting its next growth, which should mature and bloom. So I'd class that as rescued rather than being rescued. That one made it okay. So although it had very poor roots, it now hasn't. It's got a root system with not a lot to support. There's the back bulbs over here are still leaved, so they can still supply some energy for the plant. Its latest growth was a bit small, but nonetheless it's got a full set of leaves, all four, and it's now producing a new growth. So that one's fine. That's not a rescue plant anymore, but it certainly was, So, it's worth the effort. And given the bloom on that one, well worth the effort. Now this monstrosity is Bulbophyllum phalaenopsis. It was in the box of tricks that came from Archie, and I'm sure he's still giggling about that. Supposed to be one of the stinkiest plants on the planet. It was given to me as a single bulb, virtually rootless, and one giant leaf. And unfortunately I was a sucker. I potted it up in the hope it would produce a new growth. And what I thought was the new growth turned out to be a very, very poor flower spike. Like an idiot, I let it bloom. And it sapped the strength out of that bulb. It shriveled up really badly. And I thought, well, that's doomed now. But the leaf is still maintained. The bulb has plumped up a lot. And it now has roots. But no sign of a new growth. Now, I don't know enough about this to know where a new growth would come from, but that's where the spike came from, and that was the last time it tried to produce a new growth, which failed. And there's obviously two recesses in the bulb that seem to be where, it grows from. And there's no sign of any new growths on that. That's just static. It's in the house at the moment because it's not supposed to get cold. Don't like a lot of light, these things, but I've got some roots now, so I don't know what's going to happen with this. Even if it grows a new growth and pushes up another leaf like that, for me it's always going to be a problem because of its size. And ideally these plants should be grown upside down. These leaves should hang downwards, and at the moment it's in a pot. Well, to get it to hang downwards, if I turn the pot upside down, all the media will fall out, for a start. Yes, I could mount it, but then that would become a serious problem when we get to next winter and it's got to come in the house again. So I'm not sure what to do with this. If I get a nice healthy new growth on that pushing on, I think that one might have to be moved on to somebody else who grows warm and can accommodate it. But yeah, I mean, at least I've sort of rescued it, but no new growths. And without a new growth, it's just going to sit there looking like that and getting in my way. So I'm not quite sure what its future will be. Now, this is Melissa Briony, and this was a much better plant than this. When I repotted it, some of the older bulbs felt a little bit soft. So just in case, I took them off, leaving what's left here, which is not a strong plant. Effectively 2 back bulbs that didn't have any roots, and a new growth pushing on with some signs of new roots growing. And it pushed out a spike, and I let it bloom, and it stayed in bloom for around 3 months. And while it was in bloom, it made no effort whatsoever to push out any new roots, and so now it's stalled. It has got some roots on that latest growth, but that growth's not big, fat and plump, it's wrinkled. So the spike took the life out of that plant. So I'm hoping that will now recover with its next new growth. But I'm having to class that as a rescue now. And that goes down to me being greedy, wanting to see what are spectacular blooms, and just letting the spike drain the plant. I should have let it go. Plant first, bloom second. But, well, you can see from the pop-up why I let it bloom. But that could be the demise of the plant. It's drained it, so hopefully it can recover. Relatively easy to replace if I wanted to, but I'd like to give this one a go first. Right, kill another lot of 2 birds with 1 stone. Somebody actually asked me how my varicosum was doing, and the simple answer is not very well, but getting better. And the main thing is it is now producing a new growth, so I need that to push on. I couldn't resist it, but on its latest growth, with virtually no support for that growth, it put up a spike and I let it bloom. And strictly speaking, for the sake of the plant, that spike should have come off. But obviously that's drained that back bulb and probably stopped that one growing as big as it might have done. But with a show of blooms like that, I couldn't resist it. You know, sometimes you take a risk. But nonetheless, it's got some roots, it's produced some more recently, and it now has a new growth coming. We'll see. I got a feeling I might, if that one decides to bloom, I might actually knock the spike off and give the plant a chance to get some real strength into it. And once that happens, I'll get a better spike with more blooms on, so it could be worth the wait. I doubt if I'd be able to get that one again, who knows, but yeah, recovering. I'm running out of room here. Now this is the first one of a set of those that are left that are in a state of rescue for a totally different reason. A while back I tried growing effectively hydroponically using Ceramis. So basically I picked on a few plants, quite a few were in a poor state, but I was hoping that that process might rescue them as a process in itself. It didn't work, as it happens, but yeah, basically I planted orchids in the small Ceramis and stood them in water trays, so their pots were standing in water. Now the small Ceramis has got an incredible wicking property. It stays wringing wet, and obviously with it being stood in water, it really was wringing wet. And because most of the plants have been recently potted up with the base of their plants in the Ceramis, quite a few of them rotted near the base. They were too wet. Now you combine that with my incredibly high air humidity at that time of year, and that was their demise. But why I say that the ones that I've got left, because quite a few just died, out of the ones I've got left, in one of the trays was a Cattleya that had Fusarium. So obviously with them all standing in the same tray of water, they were all suspect. Now those that I've still got were treated and are in a state of keeping my eye on them, but if you sort of look at this one, its new growth that it had when I potted it has pushed on. It's virtually the same size as the previous one, and it does have actively growing roots. So I would suggest the treatment stopped the Fusarium getting into that latest growth, and that growth is probably clean. Yeah, bearing in mind healthy root system under that one bulb. But this is another one, when or if and when this produces its next new growth. If it attempts to bloom, I'll take the spike off. This is well, on my tag it says Oncidium sweet sugar, but it ain't called that anymore. It's been moved out of Oncidium into something else that I can't even be bothered to memorize. As far as I'm concerned, it's Oncidium sweet sugar, and everybody knows what I mean when I say that. So yeah, it's a typical dancing lady type, and it's in a good state of recovery. It's gone from potentially having Fusarium to probably not. And maybe it never had it, but it had to be treated as a consequence of being in the same tray of at least one plant that did. That was a Cattleya as it happened. But yeah, I mean, so this one's coming on, slowly but surely. The consequences of trying to hurry, 1, and 2, letting pots get so dry that they have no weight whatsoever, and all the weight's in the top of the plant. And the guilty party is over here. You tyke. Just literally as I picked this one up, this dangly pseudo bulb caught one of the leaves over there and pulled them both over. Now this is this really weird plant that will not grow from the base. All it will do is produce kikis. This is a dendrobium, it's lovely virgin variety Angel, and that's all it's ever done for me. But nonetheless, that kiki there is actually, well, both of those kikis have at least pushed a root down into the pot. And now the kikis are growing kikis. So I still don't know what the hell to do with this plant. One of the kikis I took off last year, and it's in a pot on its own. It's still sitting there, it has still got some roots, but it hasn't started growing from the base yet. So I'm just going to leave this as it is. If that's how it wants to grow, then it'll just have to get on with it. But I really would like to see some shoots from the base, but it just won't. I've had this some time now, and the only reason I'm keeping it is I like the blooms, because what a tatty looking object. It needs scaffolding to even hold the thing up. But it's producing some more new growths, and from those new growths hopefully will be some more roots that can get down in the pot. Oh, it's a weird plant. I can't make head and a tail of that. It just will not grow from the base. But it pushes out kikis, and they grow on. Maybe one day they'll bloom. We'll have to wait and see, but it's a strange one. Well, that one was on the repotting list. It's just pushed its way to the top of the queue, so I'll have to get on with that. It's fallen right out of its pot. Not very healthy roots, but some. It's actually 2 plants. I'd forgotten that. Didn't get put in my notes. And I've just noticed it's actually got some scale. Yeah. So now would be an ideal opportunity to get the hydrogen peroxide all over that plant, all over the base, leaf joints, canes, the whole works, and start it in some fresh media. It's a tatty looking plant, and the only reason I'm keeping that is because of what the blooms look like, which if I didn't have a photo I would have forgotten, because it's so long ago. But I will put the bloom up. And yeah, that'll have to get repotted now. It's come right out of its pot. It's silly to just poke it back in there without doing it properly. So I'll get on and do that one. Bit of a nuisance, but oh well, give me something to do this afternoon. Now this little one here will need a pop-up of the bloom, just to show you why I even bothered. This was the one that got the serious bacterial infection, and all the bulbs were full of soggy, brown, foul-smelling liquid. The plant just went down, and I took the only bulb that didn't seem to be infected off, because it was still firm, and it is growing a new growth. So I think I may have saved it. I really did not want to lose this because of the blooms. Chances of getting it again are practically zero. But although it'll be a long way off blooming now, I think the plant has been saved. I managed to get one bulb off of a plant that was seriously infected, and a bacterial infection is fast, can get through the whole plant in days, if that long. It spreads like hell. Why you get those, I don't know. I mean, I can't say why that plant went down, but it did, and it was fast, and the smell was absolutely revolting. But I think I've saved it. I mean, that isn't a bad little growth with some signs of new roots coming out. And the bulb that I took off the plant did have a few roots on it, and it's managed to survive enough to be able to put out a new growth. So it's a long way from getting back to where it was, but it's on its way. Now I'm really surprised this one's still with me. This not only came from the same lady as I got all the Fusarium infected Cattleyas from, so it was highly suspect. It also went in the Ceramis project at the same time. So the fact that that one's still with me is very surprising. But it's pushing up a rather weak but a new growth. And I've just noticed this time round it's actually starting another one. So hopefully I can recover this. And the only reason it's still with me is the blooms. They are pretty special. But yeah, sort of recovering. I mean, it was treated for Fusarium, but you can never tell whether it's really worked until you get some strong, healthy new growths with good roots that don't fail. And this one's only just started to push its new growths out. So it's difficult to tell with this one. But I have new growths, so that's a start. And I can see underneath that new growth are roots starting. So maybe we've managed to save that one. But that didn't have a good start in life, really. Now this is what's left of what was quite a large mature plant. Bloomed regularly and everything, and then it just suddenly went down. So I took off the two leads. One died quite quickly. This one is chucking out a shed load of roots in the pot. So I think it's going to be okay. And obviously it now needs to think about pushing out a new growth. I was just pulling that sheath back to see if I can see one, but there's no sign of a new growth yet. But it's pushed out a very good root system in that pot, so I think it will recover. And I mean, that's a Brassia tessa. I think it's one of Burnham's own crosses, I'm not sure, but that's where it came from originally, and I've had it a long time. But given that I've probably had that maybe 4 or 5 years, you know, that's about a third of the size of the plant when I bought it, and now I'm left with that. I'm going backwards instead of getting forwards. But why the mother plant went down, I'll never know. It just did. Luckily I managed to get a decent lead off of it before it failed completely. And I mean, there's a good load of active roots in that pot, so I think it's going to recover okay, and hopefully it'll push out a new growth soon. Don't be fooled by the massive show of green on these two plants. These are my two Masdevallia snowbirds, one of which has a bloom. Again, don't be fooled. Both of those plants have 0 roots. Nothing viable under either of those two plants. Recently repotted. I showed a video of them getting them out of the pots. But we do have new growths, and certainly with Masdevallias, you know, at some point when the new growths start pushing up, so do new roots. So that's their only hope, is to get some roots going. And I think it's difficult to say why the roots were lost on this, but I'm pretty sure that the last time I repotted it, I'd left it in the pot too long, because it bloomed over quite a long period, and that goes back a couple of years when I was reluctant to repot in bloom. And being a relative cool grower, even though this is a hybrid and it's warmth tolerant, but I wouldn't say it likes the heat. You know, the best time in the world to repot this is not in the spring. It really isn't, because it's going to get stressed by the heat. And if you've disturbed the roots just prior to that period in its life, then you've given it a double dose of stress. And I think that's what's probably happened with this in the past, is it stayed in the pot too long. That started the downhill road, and then probably repotted at the wrong time. While we're on the subject of repotting, I did say I've got about another 35 to do. I lied. Basically, going back over my records, I picked up a couple of plants either yesterday or the day before that were on the list and were quite high on the list. Their repot date was quite a long time ago. And then I thought, well, if they haven't been repotted since then, they'd be in the old rubbish bark. And I know that last year I changed everything out and got it all in Orchids bark. So I'm guilty of not updating my notes. So I don't know when some of my plants were last repotted, and all I can do is go by looking at the media and thinking, that still looks pretty fresh, it's okay. So it can wait. Or it doesn't look okay and it can stay on the repotting list. But I don't think I've got anywhere near as many as I thought. And just literally, I must have had a slack period. Probably did a load of repotting, one after the other or something, and just didn't update the notes. And then you forget that you didn't update your notes and it just goes out. You know, it's gone out of your mind. You don't stop and think about it until you start looking at another set of repotting. So I don't think I've got anywhere near as many as I thought to do, because I know everything got changed into Orchids bark, and I didn't get that till the beginning of last year. So yeah, we'll go from there. But these two have 0 roots at the moment. I'm hoping they'll get some sort of root system going before it starts getting too warm out here. And talking of getting warm out here, it looks like the sun, no, the sun's still filtered at the moment, so the shade netting can wait. But every day I've got my eye on it. You know, if that sky clears to clear blue sky, then on goes the shade netting. It's a sort of daily thought process, but this time of year in the UK, the actual number of days when the shade netting's got to go up are very thin on the ground, so it's not like a chore. It's no big deal. Both of these came from my McBean's nursery visit when they were going well. I don't think they're going at all now, but anyway, both got left in their pots too long. I didn't know what they were in, but they looked okay, and it wasn't until I finally made up my mind to repot them that I realised they weren't okay. So my fault in this particular case. Hopefully that'll be the last time that happens. This one is Golden Rialto. I love the blooms on this one, which is why I bought it. And when I repotted it, it started to go downhill. It didn't have very good roots. Well, it did push up a new growth. It has created a root system. There's still new roots growing. And not long ago, this one pushed up a spike, which I promptly cut off. So I'm giving the plant a chance. This one I should be doing exactly the same thing. It didn't have the best root system. It has got some roots, and it has pushed up a new growth, which is also producing some new roots. And it's currently got a spike. And I really should cut that off. But because of what it is, I'm giving it a chance to bloom. But what I will probably do is, once I've seen the blooms, I'll take the spike off and not leave them there for their full term. But obviously, you know, it's going to drain that plant even more producing those blooms, but I want to see them. You know, this is a plant with a lot of history. It's now called Oncidium alexandrae. It was once called Odontoglossum crispum, and I'd been after it for a very, very long time because I love the blooms. So I'm going to see them, but I'm not going to let them stay on the plant too long. And then hopefully now, with some new roots coming out, we'll get another new growth that will pull the plant back a bit. But yeah, both of those are a bit special because of where they came from. The chances of getting them again are slim. But my own fault this time, left in the pot too long. Now, this is a back to front plant. This is a Roseoglossum Rawdengesta. Beautiful, huge blooms. One of the parents is called the clown orchid because of its appearance basically, but this one got hit by scale really bad, and I couldn't shift them off the plant. They just kept taking out new growths and any new roots, and everything I tried, goes back to the wishy-washy stuff instead of the proper stuff, and it just took the plant down eventually, and I rescued a piece. You can see the progression. Yeah, the new growth should have come out down here somewhere, and it came out at the back of the plant, and it's very weak, but at least it produced a new growth, and it's now produced some good roots, so the next new growth should push on. but I doubt if I'll see blooms on that this year, that's for sure. But it's recovering, it's doing okay, and that one just got took down by scale, nothing else. You know, media was okay, it just, everything it tried to grow just got eaten off, and I couldn't shift them on that one. It's funny, some plants, you know, you treated them and the scale went away, and others, they just kept coming back over and over and over again, and this was one of those. So I'm lucky to still have that, really. Now this is a strange one. You're going to like the reason why this one went downhill. Not a lot, but this plant went to Malvern last year in bloom, along with several of my other plants. And for their display last year, they decided to do like a beach scene. You know, like a little cottage on the beach with lots of wild plants growing in the dunes. And as a consequence, they covered everything with a type of grit to make it look a bit beachy. Good job they didn't use sand, but I believe there was something in that grit that the orchids were not happy with, because all three of the plants that got that grit put on them went downhill not long afterwards. Now, this one didn't look too bad and didn't get repotted. You can still see some of that grit in there, because they just smothered the plants and it went all down in the media and everything. And this is my wildcat cheetah. It's the only wildcat I've got left. One I got rid of because I didn't like it, that was Rainbow, and Bobcat I lost. So this is the only one left, and it's not happy, but it's growing. And that is near the top of the repotting list, because that latest new growth is now pushing out some new roots. And it needs to come out of whatever's in that pot. It's not going to, leaving it in there is going to do it no good at all. So as I've got that dendrobium that fell out of his pot to do, I'm going to put that to one side and do that one and get that one out the way. Now's a good time. You can see the new roots are coming, you know, that's a good time, and that'll at least give this new growth a chance to get a hold, and then hopefully the next growth will pull the plant back again. I mean, this bulb's okay, it's still firm, and it's got two giant back bulbs, and this bulb is still leaved, so it's got some leaves, it's pushing a new growth, and it's starting some new roots. So now's the time to get that in some new media and hopefully recover it, because it's not doing that well at the moment. The only reason I've kept this is because Wildcat Cheetah is one of my favourites of all the Wildcat set, so that's why that one's still with me and not under the hedge, basically. Now hopefully by now you're seeing the pattern. In which category are most of my rescue plants? The simple answer is nearly all of them are in the Oncidium and Intergenerics range. And I've come to the conclusion that you have to keep healthy root systems with these. And if that means repotting a bit more frequently, then so be it. And also catching that repot at the right time. Now this one hasn't too long been repotted, so I don't have to worry about that. This is, the label says Oncostelli Maasai Red, but it isn't. It's a form of Maasai Red, because I think it's Maasai Red Splash, because it has got colouring on the lip. But anyway, it was a rescue plant. This is another one of those that were in the Ceramis project, so it's lucky to even be with me. But nonetheless, I rescued a bulb. It grew another new growth, nearly as good, if, well, around the same sort of level. It's pushed out some roots down into the pot, so it's got a root system, and now it's producing another new growth. So that's on its way back. The previous growth won't bloom now, I don't suspect. It's been there too long. If it was going to push a spike up, it would have done it by now. Maybe the next growth will. And that's got enough energy in that plant. It's still got leaves on its oldest bulb, although they're probably not going to last too much longer. It's got these reasonable roots and a good leaf system on the previous bulb. So if the next growth decides to bloom, I'll probably let it. But that's if, of course. But anyway, it's on its way back. As I said, being part of that Ceramis project, I'm lucky it's still with me. This is my only other Cattleya that I would consider being a rescue at the moment. This is the pieces that were taken off that giant mount that used to live up above my bowl, just looking ugly and tatty. But I took off a couple of leads, stuck them in a holy clay pot, and we've got signs of life. So possibly recovering, you know. This is a sort of a medium to miniature size Cattleya. I mean, that's about the biggest leaf it's probably ever going to get. That was its last new growth. Got something wrong with the leaf. I think that was damage from pushing it around because it was so big it kept getting knocked about, and then probably got a bit of a secondary infection. But it's not spreading, so I'm not taking the leaf off. But yeah, from that new growth, hopefully another one will come. We've got some new roots. The other new growth is here. That hasn't started pushing out new roots yet. But yeah, I mean, it's in a state of recovery, and you know, it just gets the same treatment as all the other holy clay pots. It'll either grow or it won't. This is one of those, you know, grow or out you go, you know, and it seems to be trying, so we'll give it a chance. Right, this is the last three now. This is Oncidium Tiny Twinkle, and that bloomed nicely. Now that was a double whammy. Not only was that part of the Ceramis project, so it was probably sat in water that possibly had Fusarium. Well, it was treated for that, but this one had a double whammy because this also got scale really bad. And I've just noticed at the base of an old bulb which I've just taken off, there were signs of some scale. Yeah? So even after all this time, they seem to have reappeared. Now that plant is not near anything else that could possibly have some scale on it, so all I can say is that's a re-emergence. So that one's going to get a spray, but this should now start pushing out. Yeah, I was going to say it should be pushing out new growth. There's one starting right at the base of the plant there. More will follow. So, oh yeah, there's another one up the middle there. So a good dose of CalMag will do that the world of good. But you know, that I can't let scale get a hold, so I'm going to have to give that one a good spray. Whole plant, root system, the lot, and then leave it for a while to let the pesticide get into the plant before I water it. So he'll have to stay dry for a bit now. Now these other two are both Miltonias, and they were 2 of 3 that came from Madeira, and all 3 had Fusarium, proven, not mucking about, no guesswork, that was definite. And so that was present in the oldest bulb, yeah, the one that's now leafless. It pushed out a new growth that didn't look too bad, and it also produced a root system underneath it. It's now pushing out 2 more new growths. So I could look at that and say, yep, I think I've cured it okay, but because it definitely had Fusarium, that still gets the fungicide treatment every now and again. The idea being that if it's still in that oldest bulb and it tries to creep forward, it gets dealt with before it gets anywhere near those new growths. Now that's how you have to work with the flipping stuff. You might be able to stop it spreading and sort of kill it off in the older part of the plant, but if you haven't guaranteed that you've totally eradicated it from ever growing again, then it can still get going. Yeah? So in my opinion, if you've got a plant that you definitely knew was infected once upon a time, and it now seems to be growing well, I wouldn't ignore the fact that it once had Fusarium. Never forget. Yeah? I mean, at some point in time when that plant gets big enough, that oldest bulb will come off and that'll de-risk it getting going again. But in the meantime, it still needs a treatment now and again. This other one recovered better and quicker. So again, oldest bulbs on there, which is the 2 at the back, the one under my thumb and the one next to it, which is now producing the new growth. Yeah, pushed up that single new growth, which was good, bigger and better than anything before. And then it pushed up 2 more, which are growing well. Yeah. I've still got no guarantee. That is totally free of the dreaded F. So every now and again it still gets a treatment. So if there's any remnants in there that could become active again, I'm holding it back away from the latest growths and new roots that are pushing out. Okay, so that's a look at the rescues. There's a couple of others that are sort of being rescued, but I can't get at them. There's definitely a brass Ada, Mivida, that's not doing too well, but I'm not sure that's being rescued as opposed to signing its own death warrant because it's not growing very well. You know the saying, if you won't grow, out you go. And I don't need that plant that bad, so that might, when I do get to it, because it's right at the back of that shelf, I'm not getting that locked down to film one plant. But if when I get to it there's no signs of new growths or anything like that, that may just go out. It's not a plant I'm madly in love with, and it just hasn't been growing well for some time now, so we'll see how we go with that one. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. I don't know whether that's of interest to everybody, but hopefully having a look at plants that look like they were going down, and some are coming back up again, some not doing so well, and chatting over how they got like that in the first place. You know, some of it my fault, some just inheriting bad root systems, and some getting a disease, a fungus, you know. So I've had a chat about them all, had a look at them all and their state of play. So perhaps in the next video we'll get on to some healthy stuff. Far more enjoyable. Things like this. Yeah, there's some videos about the good stuff. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.